Thanks everybody for tuning in and being patient with us on getting part 2 out. We do apologize for the delay. We just get tied up in our everyday jobs and sometimes things get pushed back. So in creating a link server, super easy to do, very fast, so hopefully this should be a very quick video. First thing we're going to cover is what we won't be covering. We're not going to cover how to create the DSN in this video. We already did that in the other video, so all you guys have to do is tune in over there, check it out, and come back here when you're ready. We're also not going to cover creating the database for any kind of administration in the database or SQL Server, or setting it up or installing or any of that. That's kind of beyond the scope of what we're doing here, so we apologize, but there's a lot of great documentation out there for doing that. We're not going to be covering the CMS schemas here. There's a lot to do with that, a lot of different versions, releases, what tables you want, what tables you don't want. If you guys are in need of help there, send us an email at support@vos.com. We'll try to help you out, see what we can do to get that all ironed out for you, but it's a little more than we want to cover in a video here. So let's get started with this, okay? In order to do this, we're going to need to execute only 2 SQL Server commands. Super easy to do. Let's get started on them. What you're going to need ahead of time is you're going to need the DSN name of the DSN you already created. It should be a system DSN. It can be a user DSN, but we go over that in the DSN video, so check that out. The other thing you're going to need is the login and the password that you used for either the DSN or just a login and password for CMS. We do recommend you do the one with the DSN, so they're all related. And then the last thing you're going to need is the server name field that is in the DSN. So when you go into the connection tab, that top one, server name, scratch that down. You're going to need that in about 10 minutes of your time. So let's get started with the SQL. Okay, now that we have our query window open, what we're going to do is execute the first stored procedure, and that's going to be sp_add link server, all one word. SQL Server should autocorrect for you, fill that in there. I'm just going to paste the whole thing here so you can follow along and see as we go. And I don't type very well, so you don't need to see me backspacing 500 times. The next thing that we're going to do is start filling in the parameters for this stored procedure. So the first one is server. So the server is the name that we're going to give it, that we're going to reference going forward in SQL Server. We're going to want to scratch that down and keep an eye on that, mainly because we're going to use it in the second command, so when I reference it again you'll know what it is. But going forward, that's what you're going to use in SQL Server to reference it. The second parameter is the provider. This is always going to be MSDASQL. Just throw it in there, it's the same thing every time, so you don't have to worry about that one. The third parameter is the data source name. So what we're going to do is put in the DSN name that you have created in the last video, or you created ahead of time, whichever one worked for you. And the fourth is a provider string. Now the provider string is a standard ODBC connection string. So we're going to have our database equals CMS, because that is the database we're trying to tap into. Our user is CMS, and our password is, we're going to use the default of Sleepy here. So you can use whatever login and password that you used for your DSN, or you can use another login and password, but this one's kind of irrelevant, to be honest with you, because we have to set another command in a minute that's going to take care of it again. And then the fourth parameter is going to be, or the last parameter, excuse me, is going to be the server product. This is going to be that server name from the DSN tab. So go into your DSN, under connection, very top field is going to be server name. Just grab that out. It's going to be CMS_ your host name most likely, or CMS_net, whichever one you used. And then we're going to execute that. Bam, see that done. And then you can refresh your link server and you should see that name sitting there. So that brings us to the second command. Okay, so the second one is we're going to set the login and password again, which would be the third time, because you got the DSN, you've got the add link server, and now we're going to do the linked server login command, and that's going to set it so you don't have to do it anymore. I'm not sure why you have to do it 3 times in the first place, but it is what it is. So let's go ahead and add this. Stored procedure add linked login, and we're going to go through its parameters. So the first parameter here is going to be the remote server name. That is the name you used as the first parameter in the first command. I told you to scratch it down because you're going to need it. So what we're saying is when we reference that link server, this is the link server we're going to reference, and here's the credentials you're going to use for that. The next one is the remote user. I'm going to stick with the standard of CMS. You can use whatever ODBC user you set up. I do recommend setting up an ODBC user, by the way, that you put in the DSN or in the first command. But I'm going to use CMS just because everybody knows it. It's going to be there. The next one is the parameter for password. Sleepy is the default for CMS. Everybody's aware of that, so that should be of no surprise to anybody. The following one we're going to use is use self, and this one and the following one which is local login. Basically, we're disabling the ability to log into SQL Server as your current Windows account. So use self, we're going to set to false, and then on the local login, we're going to set that to null. So that way it doesn't try to use any of the local accounts. It's going to use the ones that we just put in the username and password. So let's execute that and see that's done. Now the final thing to do is just give it a test. So here I'm pasting a simple statement. What you'd want to do when you use a linked server is you tap into a function called open query. You throw that in some parentheses. The first one is going to be your name, which is the linked server we used that I told you to scratch down. You're going to use that, comma, and then single quote the query. You can get into a little difficulties where you're trying to do the queries that have single quotes in them, such as dates, row date equals, so on and so forth. So what I do recommend in those situations is you actually set the text to a variable and then put the variable in here on the second parameter. It works really well for that. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to just execute this simple count of star on synonyms just to verify it works. So when we run that, we'll see our records returned. We know that works. And I do have some samples as well for pulling from the CMS and inserting it into your own database. Basically, you just tie this select statement into an insert into. And that is on the vost.com/iConnect page. So if you want to take a look there for those, have at it. Any questions you can shoot to support@vost.com. Leave a comment below. We do try to get to our comments. We just get a little bit behind sometimes. And again, apologize for the delay in getting this to you. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy.